Didn't check it.
Welcome. Hello, we're back again to another episode of Beyond Compliance, where we talk all things procurement and we field some of the questions that you all send in and some of the questions that we've been experiencing, as we advise public sector bodies and public suppliers on, the new procurement regime in Trinidad and Tobago. So, Vaughan,
Yes, ma'am.
what questions we dealing with today?
Value.
Or questions?
Well, we've been getting some questions surrounding value. How do we negotiate the best value? And when do we negotiate that value, especially during a tendering process? Is it during evaluation, during standstill, after standstill? That's some of the concerns, coming back from, our membership.
Well, okay. So how are we approaching that topic then? How are we approaching that topic? Value. You don't want to start me on value.
Yeah, well.
I'll be trying to keep this episode
30 minutes.
to 30 minutes, guys.
Oh, okay.
30 minutes. I don't know how we could do that with Trisha. This group. I don't know how to shut her up.
Yeah. I know. Oh, God.
But well, I think we should define negotiations.
Right.
Because you're talking about during evaluation, during first let's define what are negotiations.
Or even what can be negotiated.
I think we should also define value because people may take value to mean different things.
Right.
Yeah. So that's another thing we should define.
Time is of value, but people wouldn't think that is something that can or should be negotiated.
Yeah.
So
I think in general we have this knee-jerk response to value being a dollar value, and that is because we come from under the finance regime where the delegated authority. So you had this approval process based on a dollar value, and that has now seeped into how we operate with regards to when we go out for 3 quotes, when we do an RFP, when we do an ITB, and all of this, value is a lot more than, the dollar sign, and it should not be a response because an organization can quickly spend $1 million plus in stationery, but is stationery a high value item? And that will require all this intricate RFP and tendering and selection process because it's just the same thing you're buying over and over, but it becomes, a high cost because of the numbers. So it's something definitely, from the viewership and even in my own experience, it always is a challenge with regards to how do we get people to understand value and how do we now get the systems in place for that value, because an RFP, RFQ, ITB should be on the process what you intend to achieve from it, as opposed to once it's a limit, then you naturally go to do an RFP or an ITB or an RFQ. That's something,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're speaking my language there in terms of what is value and the long-standing, what I would say, influence of neoliberal economic thinking on public procurement rules and regulations, where value is conceived in this very reductive, myopic, economic-based way, where what is the cost-benefit analysis, and it's linked to cost. And we saw the travesty of that of thinking of value as linked to cost in the COVID-19 PPE crisis that we went through. We saw the travesty of that because, as you all would know, prior to January 2020, prior to the onset of COVID, PPE, that's personal protection equipment and all of that, was considered a low cost
Yes.
item
Mm-hmm.
and therefore a low value item. It was
Mm-hmm.
something you could get at a very low cost. There was a ready availability of supply.
Yeah.
So no one really checked to understand what was going on with the supply chain,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we
Mm-hmm.
come to that. And what really was going on with the supply chain was that 80% of the world's stock of PPE was being
Media
produced
China, yeah.
by China.
Mm-hmm.
And so when things were locking down around China, when China was locking down because of Wuhan and is
Mm-hmm.
coming out of Wuhan and all of that, now countries all over the world that thought that PPE was this simple, non-complex, low cost, low value good, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore was under the threshold for
Mm-hmm.
procurement rules and
And
regulation,
regulations, yeah.
right? We are very familiar with threshold governance in the
Yes.
Caribbean and in particular in Trinidad and Tobago. We think that that's the solution to bureaucratic uh, procurement law. The solution is, oh, increase the threshold. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But we saw that because governments were not prepared with that PPE during the COVID-19 crisis, because if PPE was considered, if its value was better considered, was more
Mm-hmm.
properly considered, you'd realize that PPE is a life-saving good.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
What is the purpose of PPE?
Yeah.
PPE is to save lives. So
Mm-hmm.
even though PPE is low cost,
Mm-hmm.
it's not low value.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? So when you put it as a below the threshold item, low cost, and therefore we don't need to think about strategic supply chain management.
Management.
We don't need to think about inventory risk management, right? We don't need to think about local supply, the resilience of our local supply networks. You understand? I mean, and that's exactly what happened with PPE. So we saw the failure of our regulated theory of value in our
Mm-hmm.
procurement law. We saw the failure of it in
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19. And government still, we public bodies, we're still, so many of us, and not just in procurement, across the public policy domain, we are we are hijacked by this almost invisible
Mm-hmm.
thinking embedded in us. We think costs before we think anything else.
Yes. Yeah.
We think what is the price of something in terms of what we can figure out what the price is, in terms of quality, the manufacturing, input, time, what is the cost from those physical, tangible perspectives. That's what
Mm-hmm.
we think about. Even if we're thinking about immigration policy, that's what we
Yeah.
think about. We think about, what are the physical, tangible costs. We don't think about the intangibles, like the purpose of a product or
Mm-hmm.
service. What is the real value of that product or service to us based on the purpose it's designed for and the purpose that we want to achieve? And similarly with immigration policy, we don't think about the intangibles like, a human life.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, when an immigrant comes in or yes, they're going to cost the state X, Y, and Z. But what could that life produce
Mm-hmm.
as well? What is the value of the life
Yeah.
in society, the interactions, what they can create?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we don't think about value across all public policy domains, in my view,
Mm-hmm.
in that holistic um, way. And it's hard to do. I'm not saying that it's easy to do,
Mm-hmm.
but I think because it's hard to measure intangibles, we've just given up the we've given up the task of trying to.
Yeah. I think there must be a general acceptance, though, to start that process. A general acceptance in the decision making that allows you. I think people are fearful of the abuse of, if you don't have thresholds, you don't have the regulatory requirement that we could look to see if you're in breach. But then everything there's an explanation for. With the right documentation, I mean, it comes down to a private sector versus public sector, where the private sector will allow to make certain decisions that adds value to the organization. And it's not about price. So when you look at in the financial realm, I always remember, um, going into a relationship where we did an evaluation process and there was a particular supplier who was more than. But for us to go with another supplier meant that on the financial business side, as in the accounting aspect, this supplier was also a client of the bank. And if we made a different selection, it will not affect. So while on the procurement side, we'll achieve the savings, on the banking side, they will have lost a client or lost the revenue or lost that throughput because of the sale. So within the private sector realm now, you are able to, even though it is a higher cost to the organization, because it contributes overall to the business that they're doing, decisions being made. But if you come into the public sector realm now, it's very hard to make that decision where you do an evaluation process and somebody is the higher price and you're now looking to make that selection. It's frowned upon, and this is where the negotiations aspect comes in now, where you are required now to negotiate with that person and get the price down, to make the whole process possibly more digestible. But at that point in time, are you being fair to the other proponents in the process? Depending on the time frame or what you allow the proponent to do, and that's kind of the challenge. How do I get that price point down with negotiation? How do I get that value? And I always find, like, at some point the tenants of the act may conflict with themselves. I always think of it like Trump. Which one is the S, because while I look at the value, I mean, look at the price, look at competitiveness, look at the transparency, which one of the tenets of the act can I naturally gravitate to that will supersede the others? Yeah.
Right. Let me, yeah, I really want to jump in on that because, okay,
Yeah.
so the objectives that, yes, they are in tension with each other, but those objectives are what actually give us the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to have the flexibility to negotiate and to do certain things.
Right.
Okay. So it's about how transparent we are, about how
Mm-hmm.
we justify what we've done in the context of the objectives. So we're saying in this particular transaction, this particular objective was more important to us
Important.
in this
Okay.
time. The act does not stipulate a prioritization of
Mm-hmm.
objectives. That's one. But two, to me, the key thing of the challenge that you are pointing out and bringing out there, is when to negotiate, how to negotiate, and how
Mm-hmm.
this has to be defined in your solicitation document. It
Right.
has to be defined in your RFP. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the key things that organizations need to focus on before they go out to solicit
Mm-hmm.
it, before they invite, whether it's bids, quotes, whatever. You want to understand how much flexibility do you want to have to pursue different objectives in your procurement. And if so, then you need to design your RFP to allow for negotiations even with the highest rank. That's the person who comes out at the top of a transparent and uh,
Mm-hmm.
process that you've laid out for all of the competitors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to lay it out carefully.
Mm-hmm.
What who you can negotiate with, when you can negotiate, and
Mm-hmm.
what you can negotiate. Because I mean, I know Trisha could jump in here that you cannot negotiate even with the highest ranked to change the scope.
Right.
You cannot
True.
ever
Yeah.
negotiate, because there's a rule, in bidding exercises, the duty, it's called a duty that is implied into contracts to award the contract as tendered.
Right.
Okay? So there's a duty. You cannot change up that scope too much. I mean, Trisha, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then of course you have your duty at law, your duty as a public entity at law to act transparently, in consideration of competition, you have, in addition to your contractual contract A and B duties, you have your public law duties. So you can't make changes that would negatively affect other bidders because of all of these things coming together in your negotiations. But what I wanted to just say for negotiations is that we've been talking about at what point you can negotiate, what you can negotiate, but I recall negotiation was always considered to be something that can be very intransparent. So it's not certain what you and this other party would have.
Intransparent is a word.
Well, that's a word I'm putting
No,
forward,
no.
right? That's a word I'm putting
Meaning
forward.
lacking in transparency.
Lacking in
Lacking
transparency.
in transparency.
No. Maybe it's just a word. I'll check it after.
Yeah, we have to
I've
check.
never used it.
But it is, negotiations was seen as a dark spot.
Yeah, shrouded
a
in secrecy. Yeah.
transparent process. So you're publishing this, you're telling everyone who won, or you're telling everyone the clarifications, right? We're going
Yeah.
before the award. So you've published, you shared the clarifications, you did a bid opening. I don't know what other things you would have done publicly, but then all of a sudden it's just you and one party negotiating. So negotiations have to be, as far as possible, in some way, there must be a record of the negotiation. So I know some persons have taken to doing a record of the negotiations between the parties, like how you would record on Zoom or MS Teams or so. So at least you have this as part of your record. But, you can't just go into a negotiation with a party. Like Dr. Rose said, you have to state that you can go into negotiation, but you also have to be clear as a team what you're going to negotiate on. Because you can't just have a off the script, not off the record, off the script conversation with the next party who you are in active procurement proceedings with. You may or may not award to them. You may go to the next ranked person.
Yeah. And yes, and I want to say, a lot of some of the things that comes before me to advise on would be the bidders have come in with their responses, and one particular bidder actually has it responds to what has been asked, but they give a different option.
Right.
And the alternative option, the public body wants, oh my God, it's really good. Can we go for that? But they want to go for that, that, and then saying, well, they are the highest ranked anyway. So can we go with their alternative option? Absolutely not. As Trisha is saying, absolutely not. What you need to do, if you really, as a public entity, think, wow, I didn't realize that we could have done it this way, an option that a bidder has given, right? A responsive and compliant bid gives an option. And this is an important distinction as well, because if the bid is not responsive, it hasn't responded to what you asked for, but given some other option, well, then I'm sorry, that bid should not be considered at all.
Non-responsive, yeah.
Unresponsive. But if a bidder submits a bid that is responsive and then also gives another option that you find attractive and exciting, what you need to do then, and you really want to go for it because there is flexibility to do these things. Yes. But then you call everybody together and you say, look at the
provide an option. Yeah.
Yes. We are now considering this option. Can you all also think about this option and provide us with something? It lengthens your process, but you're giving everybody across the board the opportunity. On that other option. You cannot use negotiations, even if the person that had the option was the highest ranked, to then go into their next option.
Yeah, change the scope. That's different. That's changing the whole tendering process. Yeah.
You could change the price. In negotiations, you can with the highest ranked. If cost was not a determining factor for you, so you had the weighting between cost and quality, and this person came out highest, you could go to them after negotiate price. Why can't you? Trisha?
After the standstill, I was thinking you could only negotiate price if you have a standstill before the standstill, because once you start changing price after.
Right. But you
But it,
can negotiate price. Let's
yeah,
start first with that.
yeah.
I'm asking.
Well,
I
for me, there are a number of factors surrounding the price that they will have submitted. So it's simply like payment terms. So because the government of Trinidad and Tobago, most public entities will pay late, they will factor in all their bank charges and everything. If you can give the assurance that you'll be paid on time, let's say there's some funding that we have directly from a lending agency, so that is money in the bank that we can say, listen, on every milestone you'll be paid, then that could really affect the price because now I don't have to factor any finance charges. I'm guaranteed I'll get my money. So yes, I could give you a discount. But from a changing of the price standpoint, if it results in changing of the scope, then you'll have some issues there with regards to you'll have to share with everybody else. So there are some areas where price can be negotiated, even beside payment terms, how you want to start the project. Let's say a lot of times people want to start a construction project in the dry season. So therefore you want to be able to give your contract. Everything must be done within a particular time frame to allow me to start. Therefore, once I can start within the dry season, I will have a lower cost as opposed to starting in the rainy season and wasting material, that kind of thing. So there are a lot of things that you can negotiate, to get the price down. But again, once it doesn't change the scope, it's really
100%.
important. Yeah.
But let's talk about when now.
When, right.
So we can negotiate price now. So when? So Trisha, what were you saying?
I would think ideally you should not change the price after you do that notification of award following the end. Sorry, prior to the
Standstill.
start of the standstill period. Yeah, because
Okay.
to me that seems to be a fixed. At that point, it's fixed. It's like
Mhm.
crystallized. And then if you change the price after, it's almost like you have to explain why you changed the price.
Right.
And yes, it could be a lower price, but what happens if it's a higher price
Right.
after the standstill? I mean, most people would just be like, okay, well, it's lower now. It was the highest ranked person. It was the
Yeah.
lowest price all the time, and they just give you a lower price now. But then if the price is greater after the standstill and, you enter into an award with a greater price, then that is more or less a change.
Right.
It's a change
Right.
from your notification of award. It's a change from the basis that persons would have gone to challenge proceedings or not. And so I think before the standstill, you're generally, as a rule of thumb, okay. But after the standstill, you're putting yourself in shady territory.
Yeah. Some of the things I've seen is an award with a not to exceed figure. So what they will do is they will put it as part of the standstill, not to exceed this amount, and possibly in the standstill period or the communication that goes out, they open the space for cost savings. So what is the final award? It's not going to exceed this amount, but there's a potential for some savings, to come out of it. It's like a workaround, but again, if you're not clear, it becomes a challenge, because what you're communicating to the other proponents and by extension the public is an award, right, of a certain value, and now you're going to
Yeah,
come with a different value.
there's a shift in value you're putting
Yeah.
forward.
Right. And so my take on that would be I see no problem with negotiating price after even the standstill.
Hmm.
Um, once it's to negotiate it down,
Right.
you're negotiating it downward. So you are not disadvantaging any other person who would have put in a bid if, whatnot. You are negotiating downward after the standstill period. This is a public sector entity trying to do whatever they can to
Yeah.
save public money, you know? But I agree with Trisha that, I mean, this has to be very carefully done. It has to be properly recorded and transcribed so you could justify that whatever you're doing, you're not changing scope
Right.
to bring the price down, because that's a problem too, right? Because
Hmm.
how are you bringing the price down? On what basis you're bringing the price down,
Hmm.
right? But if somehow after standstill period you are able to get the supplier to agree to a lower price for the same kind of scope, well, I mean, I am not against
Same
that.
delivery,
Yes,
Yeah.
same.
I'm not against that, but if you, that's why it's very important how, what really is the core of what is being negotiated. Might appear to be a reduction in price, but may have reduced scope. So
Right.
that's the problem. It always comes back to, are you changing the contract as tendered?
Right.
And that, as a general rule, is not allowed. You cannot change the contract as tendered. In terms of negotiating the price up, what would we advise? We tell the public that, just, out of abundance of caution, after you've done that award and standstill period, do not negotiate further.
Right.
Award the contract as tendered. You now go into a new phase, right? You've executed a contract. You then go into a new phase where variations kind of could become, because this is also a problematic area. But
Right.
then you're under a new um, legal regime per se, right? Because you're under a contract now. And
Yeah.
once the variations are in line with the stipulations in the contract, you
Right.
follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then it can be allowed.
Yeah. And I
So,
know variations have become this um
Bad
feature
word.
or this bad word. But the reality is, while you're trying to fix aging infrastructure, you are going to encounter variations. Very few times we don't have the concept in our country of breaking right down and rebuilding. We have the culture of patching, adding on, extending. And when you go into that space, you are going to encounter variations, because only when you break the wall or dig the trench, then you're going to discover, some of the issues. And once it's properly documented, I think, there will be a space for us to allow variations, but once once you have a space being reported on it, it's going to become a red flag. But again, just like single source and sole source, there's justification for it. And what should happen is you look at the justification and the documentation behind it to support the decision that was made, as opposed to a carte blanche approach. Okay, we see this particular project has X amount in variations, so therefore red flag. You know,
Hmm. But the OPR is supposed to report on variations too, and it's
yeah,
allowed.
it's supposed to report, but again, when you look at it at the high level, it's going
Mm-hmm.
to appear to be an issue, especially if you're going at a ministerial or state entity level, number of variations by value of variations. But nobody is asking to see the documentation. So in that report, there should be a remark column or a link to the
The original
documentation that
scope.
supports it, you know. So like let's say you dig in and you find some bomb from World War II and you have to bring in somebody from, away to defuse it. That's the cost. That's the reality. So
Hmm. Yeah, variation. Each variation, if we were looking into them scientifically, it would require a study to see the original scope, whether it
yeah,
omitted anything, whether it was measured properly or not. And then it's only then you could really make a statement about variations, because otherwise it's just a value.
it's just a value. That's just a value.
which is
You
why we
know.
have all these lengthy arbitration processes to deal with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, to do that exercise. Guys, we did say we wanted to keep this to 30 minutes.
Oh, we are running good, man. Good timing.
Right, but what's the takeaway? What's the takeaway for public sector bodies and suppliers on this? I think, well, for me, my takeaway, and what I think is important: can you negotiate for best value? Absolutely. Does
Mm-hmm.
the act allow for you to negotiate for best value? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is that we really must design your solicitation document to give you that power, and at what stages, because you could
Yeah,
even put the negotiation in your solicitation document before award, right?
yeah,
Of course, you can have, and there are different methods that you could use: best and final offer, and putting
right.
out different approaches to each of the things. So negotiations can be used to negotiate to get the best value, but you need to put it in to your solicitation document, how you want it, where you want it, and whatnot. And yeah, so that's my takeaway. You have to focus on your solicitation design
Mm-hmm.
and ensure that you have put it in there if you want that kind of flexibility in
Yeah,
your particular process. And
yeah.
so,
From a
Tricia,
transparency standpoint, you want it to be, as Trisha will identify, documented properly,
yeah, that's
right?
Tricia.
And then giving everybody a fair opportunity to even submit if you're changing the scope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just for me, for negotiations, I think just step carefully. I've seen some things.
Horror stories.
As chair of a procurement and disposal and advisory committee.
Yeah, just be careful. And I mean, I know one wasn't too excited about the objectives of the act earlier, but the objectives are there to guide you.
Mhm.
So if it is you are acting in a way and you can't firmly point to satisfying the objectives like transparency, competition, efficiency,
Mhm.
fairness, those things, then take a pause and maybe try to get back to those areas.
Yeah.
Because once you feel as if you're being a little secretive and a little bit too too close with this one supplier in negotiations, then quite possibly you are correct and you need to go back to the system, go back to the
Yeah.
public law principles.
Yeah.
And when in doubt about whether to negotiate or not, for example, if your RFP, your solicitation document is vague and there really is this opportunity, then, maybe you need to get independent external advice. You can, in the middle of your procurement process, reach out to a probity advisor to give you some advice as to how to do the negotiation. If you can, how to do it, the parameters and protocols in respect of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
30 minutes. We did it, guys. We did it, guys. Before we close up, I'm excited to share that PC Plus Academy is putting on its Learning Lab 2025 series,
Mhm.
where we are going to be, we've designed our offerings around not just telling participants who come to our uh, you could call it a training program. I call them labs because we are really interrogating and exploring this new regime and how it can operate within your organization. But we are going to do more than just tell you what the law is. And that's one of the key things in our Learning Lab series that we are launching. I want you to save the date. The date of the launch is March 20th in Hyatt. You'll be hearing much more from us on it. And the first one, our first Learning Lab, is going to be on the challenge proceedings.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
a heavy one. That's a heavy one.
yeah, we're going into the mind of the OPR,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things, what we're trying to do with these sessions is we're trying to really identify what are the areas of pain points that we are experiencing as public bodies, as public suppliers, as bidders, as advisors. What are the most, thorny, difficult, challenging areas? And we're trying to pull the learning together, pull the experts together, pull the frameworks to assist you, and the templates to assist you so that you could just jumpstart and go much faster and
Yeah.
with more accountability in these processes. So we're excited. We're excited about the Challenge Proceedings Lab, where we're going into all of the past decisions, all of the decisions of
Mhm.
the OPR. We are analyzing those decisions for you. We are pulling out trends and patterns, and we let me not give you too much as
Yeah.
to all of it, but we'll share more as we go along. So if you're here to the end, once you all stay to the end of our podcast, which very few of you may be doing, I don't know, but once you stay to the end of the podcast, you get tidbits from us. And this is a little tidbit because there is limited space. So save the date. Um, March 20th.
20th.
But yeah, yeah.
March 20th. Save the date. Send us, emails at contact@procurementcompliance.com. Just in case if we're going out to everyone, but just in case you want to make sure you get your special invitation, send us an email at contact@procurementcompliance.com. And yeah, let's move from podcast now to real-time engagement with you.
Engagement.
We'll
Yeah.
be excited to meet with you. Thank you for staying on and watching. Do like and subscribe to our new podcast. You procurement people, you all are coming to us after. Oh my God, we enjoyed this episode. I keep saying, well, like and subscribe. Come on, we want to get to at least 100 subscribers. I think we had 60 something, close to 70. Let's go for the next 100, right? The 100 subscriber will, well, I wouldn't be able to tell who the 100. But once we get to 100, we're going to think of something cool to do. Not sure what it is yet, but help us get to 100 subscribers. Yeah? Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay.
See you
Bye.
guys. Okay.
Bye.